Start recording. Greetings, welcome to the Transforming Assessment webinar series for April the 7th. Today's session is about systematically implementing competency-based assessment by Huang and Shaobo from Canada. Apologies, I can't quite pronounce Saskatchewan, but you'll be able to tell me. Thanks, Huang, take it away, please.
All right, thank you, Matthew. And welcome, everybody. We are happy to be here with you today. My name is Shaun Ma, and Shaobo Huang will be on the chat, answering questions on chat as we go. And we're here to share with you the lessons that we've learned from implementing a competency-based assessment approach in a first-year engineering course. We're going to keep things general so that what we talk about today could be applied certainly beyond engineering, but the examples will be coming from a first-year engineering course. So we're going to do this presentation in four stages, four steps. The first one is setting the stage for our pilot experiment, and that's actually going to be the longest part of the presentation. Then we'll talk about the pilot implementation, which happened this past fall term. We'll describe how it went, and then we'll talk about the next steps as we move forward with this ongoing experimentation with competency-based assessment. So to start with, we're going to start where we started about 4 years ago, which was, what if you could scrap your current program and start over with no restrictions? How would you construct your program, whatever program it is that you teach in where you are? This is where we started 4 years ago as sort of a thought exercise, and then it got serious, and then it became official, and we've spent the last 2.5 to 3 years getting ready for this fall. And part of getting ready to completely revamp our first-year engineering program involved a pilot of competency-based assessment in a course last term, and that's where we're going with this. So we began with a vision for our program, and I think that's worth pointing out what we were shooting for here. Basically, we wanted to have the most effective first-year engineering program in Canada. We're probably kind of middle of the pack right now, but we wanted to leap forward with something really revolutionary, something that would really put us on the map and that would be a bold effort. And by effective, we mean something that really helps our first-year engineering students in preparing them for the future. We wanted to excite, engage, and inspire our students, which is not always happening with our first year currently, and to prepare them more holistically for the challenges to come in later years in school and in employment. And if we could succeed in this, then that would help enhance the reputation of the university. So that was our vision, and it hasn't wavered. In terms of how to deliver on that vision, we came up with 10 themes, areas of improvement, I guess you could say, for our new first-year program. And going across the top here, the top 3, that included things like attracting a more diverse set of students into our program. We wanted to help the students make better career decisions, both in terms of, is engineering the right choice for you, or which engineering discipline should you go into? So we wanted to help on both those fronts better. We wanted to promote and develop lifelong learning, LLL. Everybody says that they're keen on lifelong learning, but it's another thing to walk the talk. We wanted to really invest in developing lifelong learning skills, and so that's something we've worked into our new program. Going across the middle, we wanted to invest more in the development of professional ethics, in design and all other aspects of engineering activity. One of the really big things we focused on was integrating the learning across courses. All our courses currently are run very independently, often not knowing what's happening in other courses. We're really changing that with our new first year to make sure everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and to try and work together. Part of that is on the right-hand side, sequencing the learning progressively. We also took a bold move to not have courses run for full terms. They'll run for parts of terms. They'll be intense or spread out. We didn't presume that there was any set way or set length for a course, and we used that to our advantage, as you'll see shortly. Last one in the middle there in green, prepare for the future with KSEA, where KSEA is knowledge, skills, experiences, and attitudes. We wanted to make sure that we were preparing our students properly for what they needed for second year in terms of the knowledge, skills, experiences, and attitudes that they would be expected to have. Nobody had actually checked to see what they needed specifically, systematically, and so that was a new aspect to the program as well. We have a general first-year engineering program that goes into disciplinary specific second, third, and fourth year. So there was a bit of a disconnect before we got into developing this program. Going along the bottom, on the left, respecting and valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was something else we wanted to develop further in our students to make sure that they respected each other and the profession into which they were coming into. On the right-hand side, encouraging a holistic balance in their life, holistic health. Again, something that engineering is not really known for. It's usually known for burning people out instead of caring about their health. And we wanted to make sure that that was baked into the program as well. And finally, the middle one on the bottom, which is going to be the main focus of what we talk about tonight. We wanted to assess more accurately and in a more supportive manner to foster improvement in our students. We didn't feel that our assessment mechanisms were currently doing that. So these were the main themes. Now, how did we approach this? Well, beginning about 3.5 years ago, we began with the assumption of no constraints. No scheduling constraints, no facility constraints, no personnel constraints, no assessment constraints, no financial constraints, no academic requirement constraints. Obviously, that is a bit of wishful thinking, but it was a very helpful way to really free us to think about what would we do if we could do anything. And that really got us going in the right direction. And in the first year that we really started working on this hard, we spent about a year focused on what would be the content, what would be the content of what happens in that first year, what material would we cover. And that was looking at both where students are coming in, what are they coming in with, and where are they going into second year, into employment for summer jobs, that kind of thing. So we spent a lot of time on that. Then we focused on the structure of the first year. How could we structure the first year to meet the goals that we had in terms of themes that I outlined? We are on version 35 of the structure of the program schedule, and we're now focused on delivery. We're focusing on the details of delivery, but we're on version 35 of the program structure, which gets to the point iterative sculpting. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the idea of sculpting. In sculpting, you start with a rough outline of a body, and then you start fine-tuning it and increasingly developing the resolution of your sculpture. This is very much how we approached the design of our new first-year program. It was very much iterative sculpting. We basically went down a road that we were wanting to go down until we were told we couldn't go down it any further, and then we'd pivot and try and maximize what we could of what we were shooting for in terms of scheduling or assessment or financing of the program, that sort of thing. And this worked quite well for us. We just reintroduced the constraints only as needed. We did not start with the constraints, we only finished with them. And so this iterative sculpting, which, by the way, I should note, was facilitated with the great help of our wonderful registrar's office at our university, who is very helpful in supporting our innovative ideas. They really worked hard on our behalf to be flexible and adaptive, which we really appreciated. And our dean and our associate deans were also very supportive of what we were trying to do, as well as our teaching and learning center at the university. So this is our current first year, our last iteration of our current first year program. Fairly conventional, six courses in the fall, 6 in the winter, final exam periods, a mixture of math, some engineering courses, humanities and social science elective, a business course, everything running in parallel. Nothing too surprising here. It's pretty typical for at least Canadian and North American engineering programs to some extent. And get ready for it. Here is our new program. It's a little bit much to look at, but let me take you on a quick guided tour. Starting from the left-hand side, we'll skip the summer top-ups for a minute and go to the introduction to the profession. So we start by introducing our students to what it is to be an engineer and introducing them to the nature of the program. We have an indigenization module, which sets us up to include Indigenous examples of technology and design in the rest of our program. We have an intensive course on computer science. After that course, they will be using what they learned about Python in the rest of their courses. So Python, the programming language, they're going to use that in the rest of first year now. They're going to do a natural sciences series of 4 short courses: physics, chemistry, geology, and biology, so that they get to see all of the natural sciences, comparing and contrasting them with the related areas of engineering, such as engineering physics, chemical engineering, geological engineering, that sort of thing. This is one way to see if they're in the right place, that if they maybe they really should have gone into science, that's really what they would have preferred. We want them to help them make that decision earlier rather than later. A lot of engineering students have a sophomore slump thinking, is this really where I wanted to be? Because they don't really see engineering in the first year and how it relates to the sciences. We have communication modules in both terms, written and oral communications. Couple of bouts of circuits. They're going to use a second language, computing language, MATLAB. Couple of courses in design and mechanics. And then at the end of the fall term, they're going to spend 1 day long in each of 5 different engineering disciplines as a deep dive before they have to make decisions about what engineering major, engineering discipline that they're going to go into from years 2 onwards. At the moment, they get a 15-minute sales pitch from each of the engineering disciplines. We wanted to give them more depth in terms of an experience about the different disciplines before having to make that decision. Going into the winter term, more math, more mechanics, more communications, but also now chemistry and physics. Process engineering, which is highly unusual for a first-year engineering program, but that gives them a bit of a taste of especially chemical engineering there. And then something that's kind of special that we're quite happy about is that the students will actually figure out what discipline they're going to go into before the end of first year. And the last 2 courses, Design 2 and the Disciplinary Bridge course, are going to be specific to their choices of engineering disciplines, so they're actually transitioning into second year in a more graduated fashion. And it's going to get them excited about second year and where they're headed. So this is something that we think is going to be quite attractive. And you'll notice they're only taking 2 courses there in April. Again, no final exams. All of the testing happens within the courses now. And they're all, of course, staggered in terms of intensity and time, and they're not all the same length anymore. I'm going to talk about what the top-ups are, the summer top-ups, fall top-ups, and winter top-ups a little bit later. But we can answer questions afterwards, which you might have about the structure of the program, if you wish. So last thing about scheduling is about the weekly schedule. So if this is the year schedule, this is the schedule for every week. Notice that it is the same schedule every week. Now, what happens in the lectures and labs changes from week to week. But the sequence of labs and lectures and lunch and rec time and tutorials does not change. How does this help the students? Well, they have a predictable daily routine from week to week. So if they are a varsity athlete, or they have a part-time job, or they are a young parent, at the end of the day, that can still work. And with the regular lunches and rec times, they can have a healthier break for getting some exercise, doing extracurricular activities, clubs, that sort of thing. And also, if we had guest speakers, they would be able to see all of the first-year students instead of a subset of them, which happens right now, because every student has a slightly different schedule currently in the current first year. So that is a bit of our structural setup. Let's focus on competency-based assessment now. So this is the approach we're going to be taking for this new first year. We're going to be using competency-based assessment. And competency-based assessment, or CBA, is fairly common in programs, professional programs like medicine, but it's not so common in engineering. So face the question, what could or should CBA look like in engineering? And we've developed 4 pillars that are sort of the main features of our CBA implementation. The first is a focus on learning outcomes. Now, that's not particularly special. All competency-based assessment is really based on a focus on learning outcomes. The second aspect, though, is multiple chances to exhibit competency, and that's also quite a common feature of any sort of CBA implementation, but it's done different ways in different places. The third one is later better grades will replace earlier poorer grades. Now, this is getting a bit more unique to our circumstance and our plan. And then finally, different standards for different levels of knowledge and skills. And this is where we really did something we think that's kind of innovative. So we're going to go through each of these 4 pillars and talk about what we did and how we did it. So pillar number 1, a focus on learning outcomes. First off, we had different levels of learning outcomes. We had program learning outcomes, or we're going to have program learning outcomes, which will cut across all courses. We'll have course learning outcomes that are major learning outcomes per course. We'll have learning outcomes that are within each of the course learning outcomes. And then we are also using sub-learning outcomes, which are essentially different cases of learning outcomes, sort of very different circumstances or parametric cases for the learning outcomes. In CBA, you evaluate learning outcomes specifically. What does that mean? What that means is that assignments, tests, and labs have no predictable grade weight, which is really the threshold concept for people who are learning about competency-based assessment. If you explain competency-based assessment and they ask you afterwards, but what is that assignment worth? Then you know you haven't succeeded in really explaining the idea to them, because assignments no longer have predictable weights. It's the learning outcomes that have weights. And course grades depend on your performance against those learning outcomes. Now, the modules that we have set up for our courses are evaluated independently, and students must pass each module independently. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you an example of a course that it's the course that we did last fall, actually, the statics course. That was our pilot implementation. So I'm going to show you an example from that pilot implementation. Now, there were 3 modules that happened in sequence. And each of the modules had a course learning outcome associated with it. So on the left-hand side of this slide here, we have course learning outcome 1. Students, by the end of the course, should be able to solve particle statics problems. And this module was worth 25% of the final course grade. So this course learning outcome was delivered in a 4-week-long module, module 1. And it had 5 learning outcomes associated with it. The first one was a pass-fail one. I will get to it in a few more slides, so you can kind of ignore it for now. But learning outcomes 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, these were the main learning objectives, learning outcomes of this first module. For example, learning outcome 1.3. By the end of this module, they should be able to utilize dot products of 2D and 3D vectors to solve problems. Or learning outcome 1.4. They should be able to apply the equations of equilibrium to calculate unknown forces in 2D particle equilibrium problems. And then we have weights associated with each of these learning outcomes that total to 100% of the weight, totaling to 100%, which is the contributions of each of these learning outcomes to the grade for course learning outcome number 1. And then that's converted to a score out of 25%. So we had 3 of these sort of sequential course learning outcomes. Now on the right-hand side of the slide, we have a different type of course learning outcome. Demonstrate generalizable problem-solving skills in statics. Demonstrating generalizable problem-solving skills is a program learning outcome. This is going to show up in many courses in our first year engineering program. And we are going to specifically evaluate the ability to show generalizable problem-solving skills in statics. And we have 3 specific learning outcomes for that, one of which is a pass-fail one. They simply have to show that they go through these steps correctly. In learning outcome 4.2, they have to go through those steps but show technical accuracy and thoroughness. And then in 4.3, they have to show that they have the ability to identify and classify statics problems, types, and features. Now, we hope that they do this in conventional assessment, but we don't explicitly evaluate it. Now we are going to. We're going to see whether our students can actually identify and classify problem types and features, because we feel that that is an important skill that cuts across many different courses. This is the overall picture of the statics course that we are going to do. The pilot that we did last fall was the yellow blocks, the 3 sequential modules. Starting this spring with a second pilot of this course, we're going to implement the program learning outcome focused course learning outcomes 4, 5, and 6. The ability to demonstrate generalizable problem solving skills, to demonstrate technical communication skills, and to demonstrate the skills necessary to set up, safely conduct, and effectively evaluate experiments. Now, I see a couple of people asking about, what happens if they pass or fail? We're going to get to that in just a moment. But I wanted to show you sort of schematically how these learning outcomes, these course learning outcomes are arranged. 3 in parallel, 3 in series. Now remember pillar number 2, multiple chances to exhibit competency. Every learning outcome will be assessed at least 3 times. And that goes for the ones in the yellow boxes and the ones in the gray boxes. All the learning outcomes will be assessed at least 3 times, either in a module or across the course. Basically, the modules, those yellow modules on the previous slide, they'll finish with module tests, which are kind of like midterms, with a few differences, as you're going to see shortly. So there's no final exam for the course. Instead, there are these 3 module tests at the end of each of the modules. But there are top-up module tests that offer further chances if the students haven't passed the module yet. So this is in most cases, a 5th chance to show that they can exhibit the skills that we're shooting for with the learning outcomes. So these top-up module tests happen after the module is finished in our fall and winter top-up times. And this gives a student a chance to stumble and recover before having to withdraw from the course of the program. And we hope that this will help students keep up and stay with the program. Pillar number 3, later better grades replace earlier poor grades. Now, I'm saying learning outcome 1.1, that was a bit of a bad choice. Let's say learning outcome 1.4, which is 2D particle equilibrium. Let's say we assessed their ability to solve 2D particle equilibrium problems 3 times, twice in assignments and 1 in the module test. So this is how we manage the grades here at a low level. So in the first assignment, let's just say that this learning outcome is graded for 1 question or 2, and it's going to yield us a percentage grade indicating their level of competence in solving that kind of a problem, meeting that kind of learning outcome. Now in the second assignment, they're also going to see another question or 2 focused on that learning outcome. If they get a better grade in the second assignment, it will replace the grade in the first assignment. Otherwise, it will be averaged. And then finally, there's the module test, where they will see another example of a 2D particle equilibrium problem. And if the grade is better than the current grade that they already have for that learning outcome, they get to keep the new grade. Otherwise, it is also averaged. And if they haven't passed by this point, they will still get another chance in the top-up module test, which would follow. So multiple chances to succeed. Finally, and most critically, the fourth pillar, different standards for different levels of knowledge and skills. So we divided the content materials in our curriculum into 3 levels or 3 types. Type A is the fundamental definitions and skills that need to be automatized. For writing, it could be things like spelling and perhaps simple grammar. For us, it's things like doing basic mathematical operations successfully and knowing the definitions of terms. This is a pass-fail level. So this is like learning outcome 1.1 on slide 13 there. It's this type A material is evaluated on a pass-fail basis. Students have unlimited numbers of tries to succeed. And it's automated evaluation. We're doing this using Mobius software from Digital Ed. They have some very nice software for providing adaptive automated assessment with built-in tutorial support for this kind of material. Type B would be your basic fully integrated problems that are characteristic of the field. So these would be your basic sort of junior level, no tricks, kind of 2D and 3D particle equilibrium questions for that first module that we were looking at. Students need to get at least 70% to pass the module. They get multiple tries, as you've seen, 3 or more. And these questions are marked by TAs. And then we have the type C material, which is what we would call the difficult fully integrated problems. These are the tougher, tricky problems. There is no minimum grade required for these. These are single chances. If you don't get them, there's no top-ups for these, and they're marked by instructors. Now, if a student gets all their type A's, gets exactly 70% on all their type B's, they will get 50% in the course. Now, what does that mean? That means that if they get 50% in the course and pass by having done all their type A's and meeting that 70% threshold in all their type B material, if they do exactly that, they get 50%. But now that 50% means something. It actually means they can do the basic stuff pretty well. Right now in our courses, if you get 50%, the odds are you can't do much of anything. You get by on part marks, luck, generosity, all sorts of things, but not on skill. And so this is meant to create a situation where 50% means something. Now, as a student, how do you get better than 50%? Well, you do better than 70% on your type B materials, and you do half decently on your type C materials. That's what brings you up to 100% and allows us to differentiate students, all of whom are passing, but we need to provide some level of stratification, and that's how we're going to be doing it. And that's how we did it last term, and it actually worked out quite well. Which brings us to our pilot implementation. So last fall, September to December, we had our first year statics course, 400 first year engineering students. Unlike some of you in Australia and New Zealand, we are in the depths of COVID. And so we were doing remote teaching fully. We did synchronous classes, so they were live classes online. We just did the 3 sequential modules, CLOs 1, 2, and 3 from slide 13. We didn't do the CLOs 4, 5, and 6 that ran in parallel. We're going to try that this spring. So we just did the 3 sequential modules. We also had weekly live online tutorial sessions. Now, I'm going to tell you right away, we had very nice outcomes. However, we had some confounding issues. Love to say that the reason things worked out was because, you know, we had this wonderful competency-based assessment system, but hold on. We did have remote teaching. Not sure if that helped or hindered the students, but we had synchronous live lectures with 2 instructors. One was teaching, and one was supporting the other on chat. And we had hundreds of interactions on chat, which we think was actually something really positive about remote teaching, and the students loved it. We also had open book remote assessments, both for the assignments and for the module tests. Now, I'm under no illusions. We're pretty sure that that helped the students. I mean, they had use of any resources that they wanted, which also raises the specter of cheating. We know that there was some cheating, but we don't think there was a lot, and I will discuss that shortly as to what evidence we have around that. So these were confounding issues that make it difficult to interpret why we had some success. But we did have some success. The failure rate was similar to previous years, and it says mostly due to no-shows. It should say more due to no-shows. It's not mostly, it's more. That's a bit of a typo there. So we had more no-shows, students who were in the course, who were registered for the course, but never really participated. So the failure rate, let's just for argument's sake say, was similar to previous years, even though we're in the middle of COVID and we're teaching remotely. We regarded that as fairly positive. We did have higher grades. It was rare for a student to just be getting 70 on the type Bs. They tended to, you know, across multiple learning outcomes, get 72, 85, 77, 92. And so overall, the grades in the class were quite a bit higher than in past years. But something else was different than past years. The quality of the work that we were looking at each of the module tests was clearly higher than the previous years. Again, maybe because of open book evaluations, cheating, that sort of thing. We cannot discount that possibility. But what was absolutely clear was that the quality of work was higher than in the past. Now, another thing to note was that there was certainly some confusion around competency-based assessment, the system for it, even amongst our staff initially. But by the end of the course, the staff certainly had a good handle on it, and so did many of the students. And those who really got a handle on it really quite liked it. Students felt that it was a fair and flexible system due to the multiple chances, but it wasn't just the multiple chances. For each assignment, for each question on each module test, you're saying what the learning outcomes are that we're evaluating for that question. So they know what they are going to be evaluated on. And the students really appreciated that. It wasn't like some sort of Russian roulette exercise in going into an evaluation. They knew what they were going to be evaluated on, and they could prepare for that. And lo and behold, they did better. And maybe that's not shocking, and maybe that's not a bad thing that they could do better by preparing better because they knew what to prepare for. Something else that we were quite happy about, which was a bit of a surprise, was that CBA turned out to be quite forgiving for sickness and absence, which was really helpful in the first full term of teaching with COVID. We had students who were getting stressed out or lost their internet or were sick or had family problems or whatever. And they'd miss an assignment and they go, oh, what can I do to make this up? I'm so sorry, and that sort of thing. Well, No big deal, you missed an assignment. In general, most of the assignments, the learning outcomes would be addressed again later. So just say, don't worry about it. The learning outcomes are going to be addressed on the next assignment or on the module test. And that really helped take away some of the stress for a lot of students in a period of a lot of stress with COVID and remote teaching. I should also note that all the other courses they were taking were being taught in a conventional format asynchronously. So we were synchronous, a lot of personal contact with the students online, and we were using competency-based assessment. And the reviews we got from the students were outstanding. Now, we can't be certain about this, but we're pretty sure that cheating was relatively infrequent. We saw no evidence of it on the first module test. We saw some evidence of it on the second module test, but they were kind of sloppy doing it, so we caught them. And then by the third one, we did see some more cheating. I would say at the outside, maybe 10% of the students. Now, anecdotally, in talking with the students, we heard that there was a lot more cheating in other courses. Again, this is reflective of the literature where it suggests that a fairer or more flexible, more autonomous marking system like CBA, students will engage in less academic dishonesty. So that seemed to be the case for us. Now, it's not all, it's not all sunshine. The CBA system is far more difficult for staff to set up. You have to do a lot of upfront work before the course begins. But once the course is underway, it's actually, it works really easily. And especially when you have to make top-up tests or make-up tests, it's really quite easy. The analogy I use is it's like a spider's web. Everything is connected to everything else. All the assignments and other assessments, all the learning outcomes, they're all intricately linked to each other. So you got to get that web created at the start of the course and get it right. And if you get it right, then it's going to be smooth sailing for the term, relatively speaking. But it's not very flexible to change as you go through the term. It's actually relatively inflexible for that. The one other thing that is of important note, many of you are probably familiar with the concept of constructive alignment. And if this is a new term for you, check out the paper here by Biggs. Biggs has done a lot of work on popularizing constructive alignment. It's a brilliant conceptual model for teaching. It basically says that your learning outcomes, your assessments, and your teaching and learning activities should all be aligned. So for example, you're only going to assess what you teach, and you're only going to assess what your learning outcomes are. And you're going to teach to your assessments, and you're going to teach about your learning outcomes. Everything supports each other. Well, competency-based assessment works perfectly with constructive alignment, and it was a wonderful fit. It really forces you to do constructive alignment, which is a wonderful way to approach your teaching. Now, this CBA was difficult to implement with our learning management system. Most learning management systems are not set up for competency-based assessment, unfortunately. We were using Canvas, which we really like, but it's not really set up wonderfully for the way that we're doing competency-based assessment. We also use Crowdmark and Mobius, and integrating all that software together was quite tricky. The marking workload is high and intense because you've got those multiple chances, so that is another downside, and it probably explains why CBA is not more popular. But I will finish by saying that the experiences we had last term, the literature on competency-based assessment, it doesn't tell you how to do stuff. And in fact, some of the literature will specifically say a problem with the CBA literature is that it doesn't really tell you how to do things, how to implement the details. You got to figure that out for yourself. But the general principles, we recognize those through our experience, both the good features and bad features of CBA. And so that gave us some assurance that we were on the right track. Next steps. We're going to poll the current first-year students at the end of this term in a couple of weeks Because they'll have had a statics course using CBA and a dynamics course using regular assessment, we're going to see which they preferred and why. We are going to do a full implementation, including the program learning outcomes, next fall and winter in all of our first-year engineering courses. But we're not going to do it in the arts and science courses. They get a one-year reprieve before they have to implement it in their courses for our first-year engineering program. So we're going to try it with the engineering courses first. And that's going to include other types of courses, such as drawing and sketching, technical communication, and design. And those aren't computational courses, so we expect that the competency-based assessment will play out a little bit differently with them, but the same general principles as what we've described here tonight. We do need to focus on making marking more efficient. This is something that's going to be critical to the success of this approach. And we are going to pilot the statics course again this spring. So we're going to work in the program learning outcomes this spring to give it a second shot. So that's coming up in just another month. So we'd like to acknowledge the people who have helped us. Glyn Cannell and Duncan Cree were co-instructors with us in this past fall in implementing the pilot. Joel Fry is a fellow manager of our new first-year program with Shaobo and myself. Wendy James is the manager of our Gwenamos Teaching and Learning Center, and she really helped us a lot with competency-based assessment. And Ron and Jane Graham have helped fund this venture and this initiative, along with the U of S Curriculum Innovation Fund. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is it. Thank you for your attention. And we are ready to answer any questions. I'm seeing lots of questions on the chat, and I know Shaobo's been trying to keep up with them. Looks like Dr. Amari has a question here.
Hello. Yes, thanks, Sean. That was excellent. Sean, a question I have is that it looks really good plan that makes assessment as part of students' learning journey when they go through the modules. The question I have is that if especially those lower level students, if they fail some of those assessment points, some of the learning outcomes, as you mentioned, they will sit for the next one with other learning outcomes for the assessment. Do you think it increases the load on the students?
It does. That's a great question. It does. One of the sort of running philosophies we have with our first year redesign is that, is it better than the current situation? Like, if we are to move forward, as long as we are improving things, maybe we can't be perfect, but we're trying to improve things. So I guess my best response would be, they get another chance. Does that mean they have more work to do? It does. Does that increase the pressure on them if they have to do those redos? It does. We had a bunch of students do top-ups in the fall pilot. And it actually helped rescue about 50% of the students who had to do the top-ups. So it did work for some. The alternative, of course, in the current system is that they fail an exam and they have to redo the course. There's no second chances. So you're right. There is extra work associated with the top-ups, but if you can figure out a way to get around that, we're all ears.
Yeah, that's difficult, but the way that you designed the assessment and this new course-based one, competency-based one, is excellent. Thank you for sharing it with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I see some good Q&A on chat there, and Shaobo's been answering lots of questions. Any others that want to speak up and ask one on the microphone? Caesar.
Thank you. My question is about the sort of, what model of the student are you assuming? At the beginning you mentioned you are assuming that none of your students work during the day. You're also assuming that all students come from with the same background from high school. What other assumptions are you making here? Because I see your model could work very well for certain kinds of students, but there's other demographics like mature students or part-time students for whom this model may not be very suitable. So what is your model student you are considering here? What are your assumptions about the student?
Thank you for that question, Cesar. So what I didn't mention before was the idea of these summer top-ups. You see the summer top-ups on the left-hand side of the slide here? We actually assume a relatively diverse input of students. So students are coming in and they have various levels of preparation. The summer top-ups are basically a bunch of, they're almost like type A tests. They will be automated with adaptive feedback if they're getting any questions wrong, but they're basically a check of the high school curriculum. And if they are, if they know that material very well, then they will be able to skip through the summer top-ups quite quickly online. But if they don't have a good preparation, then they're going to get the support and the tutorial support, the remedial support that they need so that everybody can start at a certain sort of minimum level. Because right now, you know, some students have calculus and some students don't, and then so the math instructors have to assume that nobody does, and then that bores the people who already have calculus, and it makes it difficult for the pace for those who have no calculus background. So basically the summer top-ups will bring everybody up to a common sort of minimum threshold, which helps sort of equalize the playing field. We were talking about mature students, part-time students. We do have a system whereby part-time students can do the first year in two passes. So they'll essentially do this whole schedule in two passes and 2 sets of parts. So we do have a plan for that. We also have equivalencies for transfers coming in, so we know what students get for having completed other courses and other programs first. In terms of, say, mature students and students who may be employed, we are assuming that they are working during the evenings. That is true. However, once we've implemented this first year, which is kind of looking like it's going to be online perhaps this coming fall, once we've done a full cycle online, they're going to be able to access all the resources online. So it will be possible for them to do a lot of work on their own using online lecture materials and other support materials. So we are hoping that we're going to be able to be more flexible for helping people in different circumstances as we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shaun, if I can have another question, if I.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Shaun, for the opportunity. You mentioned about that constructive alignment, and this. So, excuse me. The question I have is more about, I think, implications for the year 2, year 3 students. Do you have any thought for the next steps to link with the course learning outcomes, program learning outcomes, and involving some of the industries perhaps in this format of competency-based and bringing more authenticity into assessment for the future?
Yes, another great question. We actually considered going to talk to industry at first when we were looking at the content for the new first year, but we decided against it because it's just first year. The industry may be interested in some specific skills of summer students, and we did address those. But generally, when industry says, you know, what do I want out of engineering students, they're talking about after 4th year. So it's an excellent question. Will the program learning outcomes, will these be things that migrate up through the curriculum into 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year? And certainly our senior academic leaders are hoping that that will be the case. We're hoping that once we get this down pat for first year, we're hoping that a department or two will volunteer to try and implement this into second year, and then maybe third year and fourth year. And we believe, corresponding to your question, we believe that industry is going to be most interested in the program learning outcomes. I mean, what do they complain about? They complain that engineers can't write, they can't communicate, they don't have generalizable problem-solving skills. These are the things that we're going to assess across courses, and we think that's going to be attractive to industry, and we're going to plan on showing industry that to see what they think of what we're doing. And like Matthew's saying, start with the end game and then work backwards. That's exactly what we did, Matthew, for the first year on its own. Like we said, where do we want to be? What are the graduate attributes of first year? And then we worked backwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Sean.
No problem. Blazenka.
Thank you very much. It was really excellent presentation and great work. I just have one question, because what we really discussed a lot it is how to attach weights to the learning outcomes at the course level. And it is not easy, because you connect align learning outcomes on a course level with program learning outcomes, and then you should find some ways how to estimate the weights. And what we use it is multi-criteria decision making, group decision making for that. But first of all, you should have a criteria. So it works as a good exercise to clear up for the teachers and students, and also educational leaders, what is important and how to put into the relation different learning outcomes. So my question is, do you use some of these methods, or you just try to estimate it based on your teacher experience? And this is the sort of question I'm really interested in. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, we're still relatively new at this. It sounds like you have some good experience with some aspects of this. We're doing the latter part of what you said. We've been teaching some of these courses for several years now, so we have experience with them, most of them, certainly the engineering courses, and we're weighting these things largely by committee decision. Like there's a group of us, and we try to draw decisions that we think make sense. For example, if we're looking on this slide right now, dot products are not the most important thing in solving particle statics problems. Really, it comes down to the 2D and 3D particle equilibrium problems, so those are the bulk of them. However, it is important that they be able to use multiple methods to add and subtract vectors and to do the dot products. So, we play with those. So we're maybe not quite as advanced as you are in terms of that form of decision making, but I will say something that we learned recently. You'll notice that the CLO4 is only 7% of the final course grade, and this is one of these program learning outcome related course learning outcomes. And that 7% doesn't seem like a whole lot. And we were talking with a couple of experts on competency-based assessment. They said, after a few years of experience and you've got things settled down and everything's working well, you may find it desirable to increase the weighting on the program learning outcome emphasis. So in other words, the CLOs that we have that are based on program learning outcomes, to increase the weight of them, because ultimately, at the end of the day, at the end of first year, what do you care that they can do? Well, you care that they can do general problem solving, that they can communicate technically effectively, that they can carry out effective laboratory experiments. Do you care that they can solve the statics problems? Yes, sure you do, because there's going to be later statics courses. But when they graduate at the end of 4 years, honestly, the employers are usually saying we want them to have these more program learning outcome capabilities and skills. And I should note, at least in the North American context, ABET and CEAB criteria, these accreditation criteria for Canada and the United States, our program learning outcomes line up quite well with them. So we're actually getting legitimate, valid data now on accreditation criteria, which one might argue is not really happening with conventional assessments. Because when you do a regular test or a regular assignment, everything is just jumbled into one final number. Here, the numbers, the grades, they correspond to specific learning outcomes. We can tell if a student is good at specific skills or not. And that's what their grades are dependent upon, not on whether they got 75% on that assignment. It's how they did on specific learning outcomes. So, sorry, that was a bit of a roundabout answer to your question, Lazenka, but we may not be quite as far ahead as you are on the decision making, I don't think, but that's how we approached it.
Thank you. It's a really great answer, because it's always a struggle how to apply it, because there are formal methods we can use and we use them, but at the same time sometimes it is good enough to justify it in a way how you do it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, some great questions here. Do we have any other ones that everybody wants to ask? I see it's been quite busy on the chat. That's good to see. I want to point out that what's been happening on the chat is what had happened in our synchronous lectures in the fall in statics. So when Shaobo was teaching, I'd be on chat and I'd be answering questions from students. And those were either generally confirmatory questions like, do I understand this correctly? Or they would say, oh, this is the answer to this question, and they're wrong. And you would be you'd be clarifying and correcting them before that wrong impression sort of solidified in their heads. So we found the chat support to be really, really helpful, and the students loved it. They also liked the social connection with the instructors, I might add.
Sean, I got
any remaining questions there?
Yeah, I got something. So
okay, good.
You experience in the pandemic period that flip, and I guess that the flip that everybody, the pivot, I should say, that everybody has done. Is there any sense that maybe you'd go back to old ways, or in fact that you've seen some advantages in this online team-based teaching approach that you might keep doing it?
You are absolutely correct. We are already trying to build in the idea of having chat support during a lecture, whether we're in person or online from now on. So that lesson of the chat support in synchronous remote lectures, we're going to do that in live lectures now. We're going to have an online, whether it's Discord or some other chat forum, we're going to have a TA that's going to be there answering questions as we go, because I'm sure everybody can relate. You have a lecture, and we have large lectures with these first-year courses with 100 or 200 students at a time. And yeah, a good day you might get 10, 15 people asking questions during the class. That would be a good day. We had 100 and 150 people, or 150 interactions with maybe 60 people at a time online. Now, clearly, they probably have the same questions in person. They're just not asking them. So it seems pedagogically sound that we should provide a way for them to engage in that interaction. Yes, that's correct, Mike. The concentration issue is an issue, to be sure, but I mean, better to correct a misimpression before it gets solidified. And we did stamp down on sort of socially goofing off on the chat, so we tried to keep that down to a dull roar. But we also used it as sort of a live polling mechanism, where we'd ask questions in the middle of a lecture, and then people would just enter their answers on chat. And it was a quick way to take a quick poll and see how things were going and whether students were getting it. So Matthew, you're right. We do intend to use some of those lessons going forward.
I think that's probably the experience at Macquarie as well. You know, many universities have discovered wonderful new things that happen when you're forced to change. You know, even blended synchronous teaching, where you got some students face-to-face and some online, where you might, for example, live stream your lecture using say Echo 360's platform, where it's got an inbuilt chat mechanism, and some students on the campus and the ones online can be in a similar virtual space as well to ask questions. So, you know, I think there's now technologies are available to help us support this stuff, regardless of whether we're doing it fully online or we're doing a mix.
Yeah, it's a whole new world, I think, soon when we come back. I know you folks have never really left because you're not sort of debilitated by COVID to the extent that we are in North America and Europe. But
our first
it's
half
going to be a
of
whole new
last
world.
year was very remote, in the sense that we did have a national lockdown earlier for the first, say, from February to about June. But after that, our second half of the calendar year was, you know, not back to normal, but we had, say, for example, small group teaching that would go ahead in labs, but large group teaching was not permitted. So, and we're sort of at a similar situation this session, and probably the second half of this year, they're hoping to get back to, you know, basically business as usual if that was desirable. So, yeah.
Right. Huh.
But, you know, I'm encouraging the idea to people to say, hey, you've learned a lot. Let's keep doing the good bits, you know. So,
yeah, exactly. And thank you to those who've come out, and I know some of you have to go right now. If I could finish with one last comment, it would be this: when we learned constructive alignment, that was a game changer for us in terms of how to teach. And any of you who know constructive alignment, I imagine you might say the same thing. It just, you look at teaching in a whole new way, and you know, you tried your best for the first 20 years of your career, and then now you know constructive alignment, you go, wow, I'm doing such a better job now. With CBA, it kind of feels the same way. It's like, you know, CBA is not easy, but if you do it well, it's so much better than conventional assessment. It makes so much more sense, and it's fair and more flexible and that sort of thing. It's not perfect; it has downsides, but it kind of feels like constructive alignment like that. It just makes so much sense once you get the hang of it, and it's worth investing some time into giving it a try. And we would encourage you to give it a try if you can with your courses.
okay, so we're at 6 past. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Shaobo, for personing the chat, as they say. If you could please fill in our survey. That's basically what you thought of this session, for those remaining people. That'll be great. I shall stop the recording, but you are welcome to stick around and ask further questions. So a final thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you all again next time. Oh, actually, what I should have done is show you, explain what's on the next session. 24, there we go, last one. So the next one is the next session in the 5th of May, honing self-assessment via serious games and team-based learning. Please sign up, have a look, and we'll see you then.